Good morning, or good afternoon, whenever you're watching this video. I'm Dr. William Hart. This is a video lecture 1 for the course on gynecology and lactation nutrition for spring of 2013. I will be relying on video lectures to convey a bunch of information to you. We will also be relying on your book to provide sources for questions and further background information. All chapters in the book have some relevance to almost anything we might talk about, but in particular I want you to focus on chapter 11, and I will probably draw questions from there as we go through. We're talking about an important part of everybody's life cycle. It's when do you start? Now, the Supreme Court came up with a ridiculous, biologically ridiculous idea that you take the 9 months of pregnancy and divide it into 3 equal parts. Biology doesn't work that way. So one of the things I want you to think about is, what are the 3 parts of pregnancy? There are 3 parts, and they're not all equally important. In addition to the questions that you will find on the Dropbox in the lecture format, I want you to answer that for me. I want you to tell me what are the 3 biological parts of pregnancy. And I want you to tell me how much nutritional risk do you think you have in each of the 3 parts. It's different for each of the 3 parts. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to use your book. I want you to answer that as a part of the Dropbox on video lecture 1. We're going to have other questions that I'm going to give you, including page 219 of your textbook. There's 3 critical thinking questions. I want you to answer those as well. And that will be your first written assignment. Do that written assignment and get it into the Dropbox. I'll give you 2 weeks, I think is what I set it at, till whatever the 17th of July is from today's date. And then we can move on. Pregnancy has been happening ever since there have been mammals, certainly. You can argue before that. We seem to successfully keep going as a species, so obviously we must be doing something right. But there are things that are important to the nutritional status. There are factors that affect how people are going to successfully complete the pregnancy. There are factors that are going to affect a variety of things relative to successful pregnancy. We start, and I'm going to start from this point for this lecture. We start with the idea that it is far better to be well nourished going into pregnancy than it is to find out you're pregnant and then decide, oops, I'd better make up for lost time. There are a variety of things that we are concerned about. There is proper nutrition in the sense that you are consuming all the vitamins and minerals and protein and carbohydrate and fat. And there's also the sense that there are other behavior patterns that are less than optimal, such as smoking and drinking or taking recreational drugs. So a person who is capable of being pregnant, that's any woman that's past menses, has had her first menstruation, all the way until they are no longer menstruating, they've gone through menopause. They should pay particular attention to their nutrition during that period of time. You don't do that, as I said, by waiting until, oh, oops, I'm pregnant, I better start eating right. You start that with good nutrition. I want to review that just a little bit for this first lecture. What is good nutrition? Good nutrition is following the guidelines that we have laid out in a variety of different publications that the government has done for you. Probably the simplest one, at least from my point of view, you can disagree with me on this, is the My Plate. My Plate suggests that half of your plate every day should be fruits and vegetables, and that slightly more than a quarter of your plate should be grains. Ideally, whole grains. If you like cucumber sandwiches on white bread with the crust cut off, that's fine. But most of the time I'd like you to be doing whole grains. And then less than half less than a quarter of the plate is what we call the protein group. It's meat, yes, fish, beef, chicken, or other fowl, venison, if you're into venison. It doesn't matter so much. But I would also like to see people, for a variety of very sound nutritional reasons, consuming more legumes, consuming more seeds and nuts, so that the protein is not only coming from animal protein, but also comes from vegetable protein. The average person in the world gets about 30% of their protein from animal sources. We get about 70 getting our protein from animal sources. And it has some negative side effects. For one thing, there is a reasonable amount of evidence that said consuming too much animal protein increases your need for calcium. And we already know people were having a problem with osteoporosis. So this is not necessarily something that's going to affect you when you're in your 20s, but later on in your 70s, you may wish that you had some more calcium in your bones as you shrink in compression fracture. Most important nutrient that we're concerned about, that's poorly phrased. I'm concerned about every nutrient, but the one that has received the most attention in the past 15, 20 years has been folate. Because lack of folate is linked to spina bifida and other neural tube defects. Why do we have a lack of folate? Well, folate, you may remember from your intro class, is named because it was the foliage vitamin. It was found abundantly in dark green leafy vegetables. And an awful lot of people don't eat dark green leafy vegetables. They don't like bitter, they don't like the taste, they don't like the texture, whatever their reason is. And the end result is that we have ended up fortifying food, breads primarily, grains, with folate, and we watch the spina bifida rate come down. However, other nutrients can be deficient. Vitamin A deficiency will cause all sorts of problems. Iodine deficiency, leading preventable cause of mental retardation in the world. If all women had enough iodine when they went into their pregnancy and had enough through lactation, their kids would not be suffering from mental retardation. So, good nutrition, I didn't mean to forget, off to the side of my plate is the cup for your dairy. Dairy can be milk, dairy can be cheese, dairy can be yogurt, dairy can be whatever you please. You can mix and match those as you need, just as long as you're getting adequate calcium. I should add at this point, for my friends who are vegetarian or vegan particularly, you can get calcium, yes, from vegetable sources. It's a little trickier. It's not impossible. Most of what I find about vegetarianism is it's a matter of learning how to eat vegetarian. And too many people don't take the extra time to learn how to do that. So we're going to be looking at in this course then is, we start with the idea you're well nourished. We start with the idea you're properly nourished going in. And we're going to look at the consequences of not being properly nourished, and we're going to look at what the effects are on children. We're going to look in a global sense, we're going to look at things like what happens if mommy is starving, because there are places in the world where starvation exists. And what affects growth potential and human interaction growth in infants who are born to starving parents. The good news is it doesn't have to be negative. The bad news is it very often is, not because of the starvation, although that certainly is a problem, but more because mommy is spending all her time trying to get food for everybody and she's not interacting with the child. So we're starting though with, we're going to have a baby. Oh, isn't that sweet? I enjoy all three of mine now that they're grown and they've turned into pretty nice people. But what I want you to focus on is the questions that I mentioned at the beginning and the questions that I referred to in the text. Get those in. You have till the 17th, and stay tuned for another video lecture.